Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Showcase series presented by IoT for All, the number one publication and resource for the Internet of Things. I'm your host, Ryan Chacon. On today's episode, we have Gerhard Loots, the CEO of Kallipr. As I mentioned, and you probably have already seen, we have done a couple episodes with them. We've done a podcast episode and another episode, I believe it was Ask IoT episode with them. They were formerly known as MIoT, and they're a company that focused on designing and manufacturing a wide range of innovative IoT solutions to help companies better measure and monitor their data. This is a kind of cool conversation. We're talking and focusing this on measuring data in places that we haven't been. One of the previous episodes that we did was talking about the extreme edge, so being able to measure data in places that people really don't go or shouldn't go or can't go very often. This kind of focuses on their Captis IoT solution suite. So talking a bit about what does asset-to-asset communication mean as it relates to this, what's unique about it, what the problems in the market they're really seeing that this solution allows companies to help them measure and monitor data in places that we really don't go very often or can't go, but still need to collect that data and information like sewers and so forth. So fantastic episode. I think you'll get a lot of value out of it. So please enjoy this episode of the Ask IoT Showcase series. Welcome, Gerhard. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan. It's great to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to this conversation. I know we're putting a bunch of content together with you all, so this is going to be a good one. I wanted to kick it off by having you give a quick introduction about yourself and the company to our audience, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, certainly. So my name's Gerhard Loots. I'm the CEO of a company called Kallipr. I've been involved with the IoT industry probably for about 15 years, depending on how one would like to brand it or at which time the definition changed to what it is today. Look, I think my background personally is I come from quite a strange little combination of skills with law and network engineering mixed together. But I've always been curious into finding ways that's more innovative to make things more efficient and build things in a better way. And that's really what Kallipr is all about for us. Kallipr is it's a bit of a nod towards the old Kallipr measuring tool, which provides highly accurate measurements. And we're doing physical measurements out in the field at the extreme edge to help industrial companies become more efficient and to create better infrastructure, and then offloading that data at the relevant cloud. So Kallipr has been around for about 5 years. It used to be called MIoT, and we changed that name pretty recently. We've got quite a few number of customers at the brink of proper scale starting to happen now. So it's quite exciting for us to have been on this journey for a while and to now start seeing things coming together and the results start flowing in for our customers.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I as I kind of alluded to earlier, we're putting some other content together. I was talking with Jason yesterday about kind of what the extreme edge is, because we talk about edge computing a lot in IoT, but we're talking about what extreme edge is, and it's very interesting, which I think kind of ties into our conversation today, because we wanted to focus on kind of the Captis IoT solution suite that you all have and being able to better measure data, collect data from places that we really, don't go into all that often. But so I'd love it if at a high level you kind of talk us through the focus of this solution suite and kind of what it's built for, why it's different, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah, look, there's been a lot of advancements in specifically network technology over the past 5 to 10 years that has enabled us to now start coming up with business cases where battery-powered devices actually can last long enough. So from our perspective, the extreme edge is where there is no power source other than the battery or maybe some environmental energy harvesting mechanisms such as solar or wind or whatever it may be. The extreme edge also is obviously there's a lot more of it, right? If you think about the edge and data centers, you can count the number of data centers, and you can probably count the edge after that. Again, but to put it in perspective, one of our customers today is talking to us about 1.5 million sensors, in their network, which is extremely big, and I mean, some companies globally have dealt with that in the past, but I think sort of from an IoT perspective, that is one of the biggest challenges that we're facing into as well, is because you take a water utility, Sydney Water, for example, in Australia has got about 40,000 kilometers of pipe. And if you need to, I mean, that's literally wrapping around the Earth if we were to pull it out in a straight line. And if you had to put sensors in there at every kilometer, well, you're dealing with 40,000 sensors already. Yet the density of that is sometimes even a bit higher. So our focus is to make sure that we can get data from the extreme edge and land it safely and securely and consistently on the cloud platform of choice.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I guess tell me a little bit more about kind of what makes it so unique, and then at the same time, it's a little disconnected from this, but like, what was the opportunity you kind of saw in the market to bring this solution to life? Because obviously there are lots of platforms, lots of kind of suites of tools for IoT, but what about this is different, or kind of makes it so specialized for kind of what we're talking about here?
Yeah, look, I think let me start with that one. I think from a starting point, the there's a really interesting intersection between hardware and software, where the hardware guys think software is easy, and the software guys thinks hardware is easy, and the reality is that they're both really hard, and the things that we deal with is extremely physical. We've had cows rubbing their heads on weather stations because cows like a head scratch. Now you're dealing with you're dealing with environmental conditions like that, which you have to have a far more focused development on your hardware and also on your installation and holistic view of how this solution gets maintained. So from our perspective, we've got three things that we focus on. The first is to reduce the cost of deployment, yes, to make sure that the business case can stack up easier. We
Sure.
also try to increase the battery life at all cost, because every time a battery has to be replaced, it results in a truck that needs to go out to change the battery over. And in many cases, I mean, and especially in Australia is a massive country, and it's the sixth largest in the world. Yet we're quite sparsely populated. So some of the use cases that we deal with even is just simply not sending a human being out to go do a physical measurement and having to drive 4 hours. So if you've got to drive 4 hours to replace a battery, now then you're sitting with a situation again where the customer's business case starts falling over. The challenge from that end though is that in itself is a really hard problem to solve. There's physical considerations, there's network considerations that needs to be taken into account, and we believe that the future probably sees a far more cloud-like orientated economics going towards hardware as opposed to today's one device, X dollars a month type thing that we do see. So. I think where we see things going from there is just that software companies need very strong hardware partners, and hardware partners needs to really approach the problem from a software angle so that you can ensure that the end customer gets the best of both worlds at the end of it.
Absolutely. And you mentioned some use cases. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the use cases that you're currently that are currently deployed, just to kind of give those listeners who may be kind of interested in a solution like this because they have kind of that type of need to relate to what kind of problems you're solving out there?
Yeah, look, in many ways, I mean, the problems that we're solving is problems that today is being solved by human beings in a very inefficient manner. So, we focused primarily on at present at water utility sector. We're also dealing with a lot of mining and rail and transport infrastructure customers, and we help them to get fidelity of data in um, closer to real time availability that then enables them to do different decisions. Now, how that practically plays out is in the water industry, for example, chlorine is being used to make the water clean, that we can drink it and that it's safe. In many places around the world, if we didn't do that, the water would actually poison people along the way. And but chlorine obviously also has a top point of where it starts becoming its own problem if you have too much chlorine in it. So, some of the water utilities we're dealing with at present needs to manually measure the chlorine in their water system. We help them to develop sensors that can read the chlorine in real time, and then enables them to read the data at a far more regular interval, which then enables them to make better decisions. We're also heavily involved with wastewater management. If you think of the way that water flows, it requires gravity. So if you're sitting with a block in your water network, essentially what happens is the water backs up, and it starts coming out at a different point in the sewer system, and that results into, firstly, I mean, it's very unhealthy conditions,
Hmm.
but secondly, also, a lot of the countries, especially Australia and New Zealand, where we've done a lot of this, has got massive environmental fines that goes along with it. And apart from that, like if you think about companies like water utilities, they genuinely care about what they do. They don't want to waste water, and having wastewater going to their normal water systems is a big setback for them. So that's on the water industry side.
Yeah.
Um, and then look on the mining side, mines have got massive environmental considerations too. They need to consider things like their tailing dams, which essentially is where all the sludge gets pumped out when they mine. How do they ensure that that doesn't become toxic or doesn't run off into other areas? Dust monitoring is massive for them. And then if you think of the rail and transport networks, Australia's had an interesting weather weather period in our time over the last 2-3 years. 3 years ago, we were battling with droughts and bushfires. I'm not sure if it made it across your way, all that news, but and then for the last 2 years, we've been dealing with massive floods. So and that wreaks havoc on the transport systems as a starting point. Because roads basically disappear. There's also loss of life in these things. So we help the transport structures and the smart cities infrastructures to start measuring, well, what's the water levels, and start predicting some of the modeling that enables them to make better decisions. It's a very interesting phase that we're in. We're busy replacing human senses, and I think wherever you can imagine, if there was a person standing there, what decision could the person make? We're just trying to be the eyes and ears and nose, essentially, of that person, and provide that data at a central point so that a better decision can be made. I hope that's not
Absolutely.
too abstract, and I'm happy to go into more details on.
No, no, it's great. No, I appreciate you kind of diving into that. I mean, I think, in with this episode, our goal is to really just kind of outline at a high level what the focus of the solution is, and kind of what industries it really plays a role in, and use cases that we potentially can talk about. It seems like the ROI is pretty clear and no brainer. But is there anything kind of to elaborate on what companies are seeing, kind of from a success story standpoint?
Yes, so I mean, look, with Sydney Water, for example, has got a very clearly documented ROI where they've managed to avoid sewer spills. I think we've got 250 times already. If you add just the environmental fines as the only ROI, that already pays for the deployment a few times over. If you think about the water beyond that, I mean, in the chlorine sector, obviously, it's very, there's the monetary element of all of this, which stacks up relatively easily. But the use cases that we generally focus on are use cases that sit sort of at the bottom of the Maslow hierarchy. It's about safety, it's about security, and ensuring that we've got things like water and safe resources available for us, as opposed to the more self-extensionistic things.
Right.
And they do tend to stack up pretty quickly. It's we try to understand the customer's problem deeply so that we can assist them with the business modeling at the same time, because ultimately, you've got a lot of people who are pioneers in their field, risking their careers and trying to find a way to do things better. So we embrace that responsibility.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, it's a very exciting space, a space that we haven't covered a lot about. Like we talk about remote monitoring and solutions like that, but when it comes to the areas that you all are focused on, it's very relevant, and an area just hasn't got a lot of coverage, just because we haven't had that many experts on here to talk about it. So
Mm.
this is very, very important kind of topic, and I guess for our audience out there who wants to learn more and kind of get a better sense of what it is you're doing, what use cases you're focused on, how they may be able to kind of touch base, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, look, as a starting point, we've our Kallipr website is kallipr.com. So that's llipr.com. We've got several use cases and case studies up there relative to industries that people can learn from. LinkedIn, we also keep on posting new use cases as we develop them, or they can just reach out to us directly, either via LinkedIn or via our website. And we'd be keen to chat to anyone who wants to help make the world a little bit better. So.
Fantastic. Well, Gerhard, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it, and look forward to hopefully having more conversations about this and other topics together.
Great. Thanks, Ron. Appreciate the chat.
All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the IoT Solution video series from us at IoT for All. If you did, we'd really appreciate it if you would like this video and subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so. If you have a potential solution or something in the space that you would love to showcase to our audience, please email me directly at ryan@iotforall.com. I'd be happy to discuss what it is that you have going on and find ways to get that out to our audience. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next time.